Welcome to the first Lunch and Learn for the School of Library and Information Science. I'm very excited to see so many people here. We've got a couple of new faculty members who want to talk a little bit about who they are and kind of where they're coming from. But I want to take a couple minutes just to let everybody know a few things that have happened to the program very recently. Fall of 2012, we offered classes in the master's degree in library science, and that was it. Beginning in January 2013, we started a new undergraduate minor in information studies. And that's actually the first completely online, the only online minor at the University of Kentucky. Over the summer, we had another group, another unit in the college relocate to our school. That's the Division of Instructional Communication and Research. We're very happy to have them here. They do a lot of the Comp and Com series for the undergraduate freshman courses. It's a required course for their gen ed requirements. So we're very happy to have them as well. We also have 3 new faculty members who started this fall who will be in the Information Communication Technology program once that gets its final approval, probably in December. And actually, if we could just have those 2 people stand, 2 of them are here today. Michael Sigurdikas is here, and his area is
social media, social interaction design.
And we have Jasmine McNeely, and her interest is law. But it's really more than that. What is it?
Law, policy, yeah.
So they will actually both be teaching special topic courses in LIS in the spring. So Michael will be teaching content management systems, and Jasmine will be teaching a course on information policy regulation. The third faculty member from that department is Shirali Ziadali, and he'll be teaching an introductory course to cybersecurity. So they're bringing a lot of new, kind of different kinds of things into the library science program, which I think will be very great. So today, we're talking to 2 of our new library science faculty, and we'll have another Lunch and Learn in October to introduce our second batch of 2. So in addition to all the other stuff that's going on with our program, we started 4 new full-time faculty in the program, and that normally is enough for anybody. But we have Maria Cahill and Sean Burns, and I'm not going to say much about them. I'm going to let them introduce themselves, talk a little bit about kind of how they got to where they are today, why library and information science. They'll talk for a few minutes and we'll open up to questions. Very casual, very informal. Feel free to help yourself to pizza at any time during the presentation, and I'll go ahead and let them get started.
My name is Sean Burns, and a couple of my specialties include academic libraries and scholarly communication. I received my PhD from the University of Missouri in Columbia, Missouri, and I'm here now. What else is good to say? Why am I doing libraries? Okay. When I was about 12 years old, probably like, I don't know, maybe many of you here, I used to read a lot of science fiction and fantasy novels and magic novels, and there was this character in this one book who was an archivist. And so my aunt asked me, as many aunts probably asked their nephews and nieces, what do you wanted to be when you grew up? And I said, an archivist. In a way, I've gone into a related field, and that was purposeful. I've always been focused on libraries throughout most of my life. In college, I majored in philosophy and religious studies and English, and I think because of those majors, I always had, I developed an interest in bridging, trying to understand how to bridge discourses among different disciplines. So how do you get chemists to talk to English professors, or biologists to talk to history professors, history researchers, and the like. And librarianship and library science has been very good about bridging those connections in a number of different ways. So that's the reason why I chose to become originally a librarian. When I went to graduate school, the intent was to become an academic librarian. Although I've always I did entertain the idea of becoming a public librarian after a friend of mine who received his master's degree was intent on becoming an academic librarian and became a public librarian and said it was way more difficult than being an academic librarian because there's so much more variety in the kind of interactions you get. More challenges and just a vast array of people who you'll talk to and different levels of education, backgrounds, and religions and the like. Whereas in academic library, there's different challenges, but sometimes it's, you can predict what your challenges are going to be more easily. But when I was in the master's program, I was asked if I wanted to go into the doctoral program, and I said, why not? And I did that, and it's been fun. I focused on academic libraries from the beginning and worked through one during my master's program. I worked at a small liberal arts college as a cataloger, later as a cataloger, but first as a reference librarian, and that was really quite enjoyable. The nice thing about working at a small college is that you got to know the students really well, and you got to develop, conduct a lot of one-on-one interactions with these students, with computer help, research help, walking the stacks, roving the stacks, and the like, plus in classroom instruction. Then I got interested in scholarly communication issues because academic libraries at the core is about managing scholarly communication. And that goes into the broader field of information science. There are information scientists out there who are not particularly concerned with academic libraries, but there's an overlap, and thus I studied academic libraries and scholarly communication. It's your turn.
I'm Maria Cahill. I did my PhD work at the University of Tennessee in literacy education. And I was a school librarian in Beaufort, South Carolina. And during the time that I was in schools was the time that No Child Left Behind was unfolding. And at that time, there was a lot of interest in early literacy and in reading. There was a big federal push for a project called Reading First and Early Reading First. And with that came a lot of federal money for reading education. And what I noticed in my school district was that as librarians, we called ourselves literacy people, but then with this Reading First project and with all the decisions that were being made and all the money that was being spent, the librarians weren't really called to the table for that. And I thought that was very interesting that we think of ourselves as literacy people, but maybe others don't perceive us that way. And so that's why when I did my further studies, it was in literacy rather than in libraries, because I think libraries do have a real role to play in furthering literacy in children particularly, but across the age spectrum. But particularly with children, and I think it's unfortunate that we don't always have a place at that table, and I think that maybe some of that is because of the way we've positioned ourselves, and maybe some of it is that we haven't done a good job of being a voice for ourselves. But certainly I think that there's room for us to grow in that area. So in my own research, I'm interested in looking at the role of professional development for school librarians particularly, but also children's librarians in public libraries. And then also another interest of mine is looking at how educational media can promote literacy development for young children. So before I was here, I taught at Texas Women's University, and I was there for the past 4 years. And I call Tennessee my home, and so it's nice to come to Kentucky and be closer to where I consider home, both geographically and culturally. Texas is a little bit different place. I mean, they think that's a great thing, and I'm sure it is, but it is different than here. So it's nice to be, and it is a different place, isn't it? Not better or worse, it's just different, and so this is closer to home for me. And so I look forward to many good years in Kentucky.
So we're going to open up the floor to questions. I'll start. Would each of you talk a little bit about kind of the decision process and coming to Kentucky? why here? And well, Marie, you've actually spoken to that a little bit, but if there's any other things about the program or the college or the...
So one thing that I really like about the school and in my position is school librarians are often are trying to straddle two worlds. We're in education and we're in library science. And so what is a very nice thing for me and played a part in my taking this position is that I am in both colleges. I'm in the College of Education and the College of Communication, so my position is actually split. I'm mostly in library science. I'm 75% library science, but I'm also 25% education, and that's nice because even within education, as I said, we're kind of stepsisters, and in library science, I feel like we have a better place, so it's nice for me that I can bridge both of those worlds in this position.
I was and am attracted to Kentucky because it has a long history. There have been notable professors here, including Lois Chan, Dr. Lois Chan, and Donald Case. It is an exciting program. When I came to interview last year, you can sense the excitement about the expansions that Will was talking about at the beginning of this, and everybody's been very nice. It was very nice when I was here, and it still continues to be very nice and congenial atmosphere. Plus, I like the geographic area too.
My question for you, Professor Cahill. So you talked about playing a further role in literacy. I know that for a lot of students, we're always looking for ways to get involved. Are there any kind of advocacy programs that we can get involved with to sort of help with those initiatives? Anything that we can do while we're in school to kind of get involved on the ground level?
Oh, certainly, yeah. So if you're interested in working with children, there's a public library initiative that's a joint initiative of the ALSC, which is the Association for Library Service for Children, and the Public Library Association, and it's a project called Every Child Ready to Read. And it's a family literacy program in which the library recognizes the role that parents and caregivers play in the literacy development of their children. And so it's a program that gives them tools to use in helping their children develop. And so public libraries probably throughout the state are involved in that, and they're always looking for volunteers, and they're looking for people to be involved in that to get a little bit further training, and then so it's kind of a train the trainer model where you as the librarian will be trained, and then you'll be training the parents to implement some of these strategies with their children.
I just have a question for Professor Burns. I figure we're all going to want to develop the skills like good communication, presentation, all that. But for the aspiring academic librarians, do you have any tips for strengths they should be especially working to develop?
In addition to, well, the number one characteristic of an academic librarian, of a successful academic librarian, is the ability to reinvent yourself. Change has been a focus or been an aspect of academic librarianship since the beginning, because technology is a fundamental part of managing communications, documents, books, journals, and as these teach, and it has been for the last 100+ years. And the ability to reinvent yourself because of these external factors that are going to change your job is number one important. So how do you do that? Well, being familiar with as many methods for retrieving, organizing, discovering, disseminating information in whatever format that it exists in, as well as at least cursory familiarity with a number of topics, subjects, things like that.
You're very quiet today. I have another one. Either in your field specifically or in the broader expansive library or information science, and you maybe kind of touched on this a little bit already. What do you see as some of the challenges that perhaps the students will need to start thinking about as they start their career? So either challenges in the field, challenges professionally that it might be good for students to start thinking about now.
Sure. One of the challenges for libraries in general, not just academic, but libraries, public libraries, is the ability or the necessity to recognize that your services are going to need to be more diverse in an increasingly competitive environment for people's attention and needs. So the scholar, the researcher now has a variety of places to go other than the academic library to retrieve scholarly communication. The user of the public library has a number of places, like the scholar, to go to retrieve information on the web, for example, but also a number of choices as far as leisure activities to satisfy their leisurely wants, whether it's reading for entertainment or reading to their children and the like, or just spending a day or an afternoon at a place. So how do you meet those needs that are or develop those services that are going to need to be incredibly diverse is going to be one of the big challenges, especially for a field that has been focused on books and delivering books and getting books out, which is still going to be one of the primary missions of libraries, academic or public, but also in the background having these additional services available. And libraries do a wonderful job of already doing this. There are not just reader advisories, but storytelling. I've been to a number of puppet shows at the public library. But institutional repositories at academic libraries and other community events at public libraries is going to be incredibly important. So beyond books is going to be one of the major themes in the 21st century.
I think something that's important for librarians to do that we have the skill set to do, we just haven't necessarily done it, is measure our own performance a little better and assess our own performance a little better. So like Sean just said that puppet shows at the public library, and I think traditionally those have reached a wide audience and they've been effective, but I think that our efforts at measuring how effective they have been haven't been very good. So what we say is, oh my goodness, everybody left and they loved it. And they were all smiling, they all had a good time. We did a great job. And I think we need to do better than that. We need to start measuring, well, how did that make a difference? Like, how is that gonna affect kids? How's that gonna affect families? How is that gonna affect things? And we need to be more thoughtful about how we're gonna measure before we ever get started, because so many things are data-driven now, and in schools too, where we're holding teachers more accountable as librarians, and you're a certified teacher, and so you too will be held accountable. And so to find ways to measure what you do and to advocate for yourself, because that's really hard. You know, like we're service people, and so we want to serve, where measuring your effectiveness is kind of serving yourself and tooting your own horn, and that's really hard for us to do, I think, but I also think it's necessary for us to do if we are to continue doing.
We learned there's a couple good things about that, though. One is the greater the expectations of you, the more you're going to have to prove and live up to those expectations. But also, another challenge would be just becoming political savvy. And we learned this at the Kentucky Library Association last week about House Bill 1, and the need for public librarians to respond to existential threats to public librarianship. And this is House Bill 1 is, as I understand it, still new. I got an education at KLA last week, being new to Kentucky. Is a bill in response to certain tax restructuring that's going on in Kentucky, and how public libraries will receive taxes and what they'll have to do in order to continue to get funding or, and the like. So there are a number of challenges, yeah. Audit, we live in an audit culture, and we'll have to respond to that.
Yes.
I feel bad just Sean because then he said it's going to feel like an answer again. But I'm going to ask you anyway. Do you have a favorite author, book, theorist, and both of you?
No.
Yeah.
You go first.
So I think his name is Hankis, but maybe it's Hankies, Kevin Hankies. He is a picture book author, and he's famous for mice. He's got Julius and a Lily and an Owen, and but what it is it's really children disguised as mice, it's actually just really people disguised as mice because they have the same fears and expectations and hopes that we all have. And so there's one called Julius, Baby of the World, and it's really Lily's jealousy of her little brother. And we all feel jealous, I think, when somebody comes in on our turf. And so anyway, I think he's he's my favorite.
He lives in Madison, which is where I'm from. He lives like just a couple miles away from each other.
Really? How cool.
The Lexington Children's Theater is currently, they're in production for Lily's Purple Plastic First.
Oh.
Which is based on one school.
So wear your red boots.
My favorite author is, speaking of Texas, Larry McMurtry. Are you familiar?
Mm-hmm.
And my favorite book is, although he didn't write my favorite book. My favorite book is Les Miserables by Victor Hugo, which is fantastic, mind-blowing read. And but my 23-month-old son has made me read The Grinch Who Stole Christmas at least 78 times. And I'm now an enthusiastic believer in Dr. Seuss. God, it's genius in that writing. It's really incredible. And as somebody who has read that Grinch at least 8 times a night for the last 2 weeks, I almost have it memorized too. It's something. Joe.
Again, not to interview themes at all, but I'm curious. You've identified a couple of real important themes. In terms of the future of libraries, the funding threats, the people that very casually write to the editor and say, well, why do we really need to fund libraries at all? Because we need to go on the web, and also the related topic of assessment and showing value. I just wondered, as the enthusiastic new participants in our program in delivering the curriculum, how do those issues inform your teaching, do you think? Or how do you see that being integrated into courses? And I'm curious, partly just because, often, we feel like we have so many things we have to address, and then you sort of imply, well, you'll figure out a lot of that when you get out into the profession, when you actually have to do it. But do you see those topics mostly relating to a particular course like management, or being pulled into every part of the curriculum in your teaching, your own interests, your areas?
So what I've tried to do in my courses previously is introduce that outcomes-based planning model. IMLS funded like a kind of a self-course, I think with Indiana, I don't know, but it's a really nice online explanation of outcomes-based planning. And I've tried to have my students use that in different courses so that they understand the whole evaluation piece before ever beginning a project. So even in collection development, I made sure that they had access to that information, and then considered evaluation measures within the design of their projects, and in youth services the same way. In terms of school library management, we had an evidence-based theme integrated throughout the whole course. And I think it's really important everywhere, but especially in schools, because measurement is such a big thing there right now.
I guess the way in the courses that I teach, for example, if I were teaching or have taught in past academic libraries, some of these things just I try to place in context, both present day context and historical context. Academic libraries, for example, historically are a relatively new thing. It didn't come into prominence as we know them today, or in their form as we know them today, until the end of the 19th century. And understand some of the background, some of the funding background, present and past, some of the technological backgrounds and how technology has shaped academic librarianship, present and past, higher education funding, relationship to state government, and things like that. Similar in the public library, having an understanding of municipal governance, and just the broader context, I think, is what I try to incorporate into my teaching.
I have a question. In terms of output-based modeling or production-based modeling, what you were talking about, once you have that data, what does success look like with that data?
It's how you define success. So if you say 85% of my participants will X, then success is if 85% of your participants do, 85% or more do. And but I think also success is understanding why they did or didn't, and then building that change into your planning in the future. So I think it's okay to fail. Actually, sometimes failing is good, because it makes you change and it makes you think more about success.
Any other questions? Joe again. Years ago, and Jeff can maybe remind me of when it actually was, but the university used to have a program with new faculty where they did this big bus tour of Kentucky where I think Professor Case was on that once at one time, where there would be an exciting card game as the bus traveled throughout the state. And part of it was, when UK was connected to all the community colleges, and they would visit all these remote locations and such. And in some ways, it's kind of sad that it's gone away, because it's a great kind of introduction to kind of trial factors, to see all the state. As people that are new to Kentucky, I just wondered if have you found like a favorite view spot yet, or a place you want to go, or what's on your wish list for places to check out as we get into the nice fall weather?
We live near Woodland Park, so we are there almost every day, and it's a lot of fun. Just it's a block away for us, so that's why we're spending a lot of time. The place that I want to go, I'm waiting for mosquitoes and ticks to die down, and to go out and see Red River Gorge. I'm excited about it. I'm excited about seeing that and doing some hiking out there. But downtown is fun. The farmers market, that's really neat, and a lot of the restaurants down there are great too. So I still haven't seen the music scene yet.
The what?
The music scene.
Here?
Yeah, witnessed or heard. Yeah.
There is one?
That's what I'm told.
I don't leave my house past 5.
Did you ever do
Yes, we're going to go. I think we're going. I haven't gotten tickets yet, but we're going. Yeah. Excited. But what's not caught in Les Mis, as well as in the book, is the 150 or so pages dedicated to Waterloo. Yeah. And when I was reading that, when I read it the first time, there's a bad word in French that he utters, and I didn't know what that word was in French. I had to look it up using a book because it's before the web, and I was like, I started laughing. I laughed for I think an hour straight. It was at the end of this very long, torturous, deathly battle.
So places in Kentucky, we too are looking forward to that Red River Gorge, and we've heard about Mammoth Cave, and we like hiking, so we're looking forward to that, especially like now that it's starting to feel fallish. We did recently go to Shaker Village, which I thought was I feel stupid because I didn't know this, but I didn't know like the whole Shaker lifestyle. I knew they were like simply people. I didn't know that they were celibate people, which I guess is why there are no more Shakers. Says the woman with lots of kids. So recently, because I have lots of kids and they are involved in athletics, I am getting to know Kentucky's soccer fields very well. I've experienced a number of them in parks.
You said you were from Tennessee. Were you primarily in the Knoxville area, or where were you in Tennessee?
So I grew up in Johnson City, which is East Tennessee near the Virginia border. And my PhD I did at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville. But we actually lived in Johnson City when I did that because I had small children and I needed the social support. And so yeah, mostly Johnson City and the Tri-Cities.
I did my undergraduate at MTSU in Murfreesboro.
Oh, yeah.
Lived in Tennessee prior to that as well, so I was there for about 9 years.
And culturally, it seems very similar to Kentucky, doesn't it? Yeah.
What are the questions, John?
I got one more. For each of you, what are your top 3 pieces of advice for up-and-coming professionals? What do we need to know? Sorry to come on.
Gracious. Okay, so one thing, attitude is everything, I think. I just think, like having a positive outlook is really important. I think understanding technology and becoming a technology ninja is going to be important in life from now on, I think, beyond just libraries. Oh, a third piece of advice. Eat well.
Yeah. That's true. That's a good one. Yeah, taking ownership of technology instead of having technology dictate your practice or services or what you can offer. Figuring out how technology can be used to do what you want to do with your services and what you offer. Attitude is a great one. That's a really good one. Especially a very confident attitude and one that is. So I've known a lot of people who work in public libraries, and I know a lot of criticism against public librarians has been service related. And just if you go into public librarianship, especially having a love for people. All kinds of people and patience with the kinds of challenges you're going to receive in a public library is very important. Third one, the ability to reinvent yourself. So imagine that librarianship. If you're going into library, we keep talking about librarianship. I guess that's because of
because we're in library.
Yeah, but in some ways, it could be an information profession more broadly defined. Yeah. But I guess a good heuristic I like to think of is or to use is to imagine that my job will be obsolete in 5 years, and what will I do to overcome that? And that kind of was, I think it's a good heuristic to use to when you try to reinvent yourself. That's 5. I'm not letting Maria off the hook for 6.
Oh,
You both talked about technology a lot. Is there any specific technology that you find particularly helpful, either professionally or personally?
As long as it's open source. I'm kind of, I've been using Linux. Linux is an operating system that was founded about 22 years ago, created about 22 years ago by one person, but then became a collaborative thing, and I've been using it solely. Well, Windows 98 was my last other main operating system, and pretty much. And I'm a big fan of free and open source software because you can take ownership of it in a way that you can't with proprietary software. And even if you don't become a programmer or a coder, the mindset is one of taking ownership, and which is, I think, a very good mindset, as I've already mentioned. So broadly, that kind of framework, I don't think there's any specific software program that I would suggest.
I have a related question to this. Where do you see the role of social media and libraries?
Where I see what?
So social media and libraries, do they mix or not?
There's a number of social media use in libraries. I don't know about school libraries because there's so many restrictions on what school librarians can do with outside technology. But academic libraries and public libraries use a lot of social media, Twitter, Facebook, Google Plus now, Pinterest, and then the various book-related. What's the one that I'm forgetting? The big book one. Goodreads. And
Library thing?
yeah, library thing. There's all kinds of ways for librarians to engage. There's also a lot of critical inquiry into the use of social media. So you don't just use social media for using social media's sake, but you actually have a plan and you go about doing it in a rational way. You think through it and you use it effectively. So you're not just wasting resources on that. So probably a lot like that. Social media has also become a very important technology for scholarly communication. So a lot of researchers, scholars are now disseminating or communicating their what they've published or what they're doing through social media. There's an open science trend, I guess, or movement going on that's urging scientists not just to release the data after they publish, but to release their data as they are doing their data. So you keep a public log, and scientists generally have a log, a research notebook that they use, and there's a movement to, where possible, where it doesn't infringe on, for example, privacy concerns, to release that as you collect the data. But there are barriers in place for that to truly take root.
On that same point, do you have any sense of any kind of traction in open source publishing?
There's a lot of open source publishing.
And how well
Platforms.
How well respected it is by
Open access,
institutions?
like open access publishing. It's growing. 10 years ago, you would read an article about open access, an open access document not being judged for the merit of the article. For example, if it was a scholarly article, journal article. There was a lot of mistrust of what that meant, of not just publishing on the web, whether it was behind a paywall or was freely available through a website, but just that it was available freely. The mistrust, I don't think, is there in great proportions anymore. I think people have a greater trust of open access documents and what you can find on the web. Part of the problem is that you can use the web to find trash and really good stuff. But if you go to an academic library, the researchers, the faculty, the professors who have spent their careers in academic libraries and going to the stacks to get a journal, and then later on going through the academic libraries databases to get a journal, that stuff has already been evaluated in a way. It's gone through criteria that to make it on those shelves. It has to be of some kind of quality and some kind of importance to the community before a library will put it in their database or on the shelves or buy it in some way. But with the web, there's no longer that gate. And so anything can be discovered on a search engine when you search for something related to your field. And that, I think, was part of the mistrust of open access. You can pull up a result as in response to a Google search that cites, that's a reference to, for example, Dr. Case, an article that Dr. Case may have published, but then an article, the next link could be something somebody put on their blog that's just a rant against whatever, And having that mix of results is very unfamiliar terrain. It was very unfamiliar terrain for, I think, researchers up through the early 21st century. But now I think people are getting more familiar. And also the institution of science itself has grown to support open access so that you have the government supporting open access movements, both here in the US and in other nations, including most predominantly the UK. And that has given more weight to open access publishing.
Any other questions? Well, thank you all